We had a really beautiful, beautiful relationship. I was always the softie and she was larger than life. Like, don't mess with my sister.
Yes.
I will come for you. And she's like, tiny. It was a stunning relationship. I was in love with her. And when we lost her, it was just soul crushing. And I think the way that we also lost her was just so unfathomable.
702.
The upside of failure.
Sometimes failure is the foundation of greatest success stories.
She's in the building. Nomalanga.
Hi.
Firstly, you look flippin' amazing. You smell so good.
Wow.
I'm loving how every time guests come here, they're like, I had to dress up.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I will remain the hobo.
Hobo. Listen, you are a broadcasting icon, a legend in my
man.
books. Really and truly, I listen to this show because you have such a comforting aura about you, such a welcoming aura about you. It's so disarming. You can come here with your guard up and then Relebogile is like, babe, relax. You're at home, chill, take your shoes off, let's talk.
We are at home.
And I love
right?
that about you.
Oh, thank you. I'm so excited that you could join us. And it's so weird. I was looking at our Instagram conversation because every time we have a guest, I'm always trying to sort of remind myself of the journey we've had together. And I was trying to remember where we met, but I remember I was looking at our Instagram DMs. It was 2017, right? And we were saying, I was saying you're so gorgeous, and you're like, it was so great to finally meet you.
Oh, wow.
And I'm like, was it that long? And I could not remember. But what I do remember is you have been slowly building brick by brick this brand of yours, this career of yours, to get to a place where now you just hot from hosting the South African Music Awards.
Darling. I mean, when you put it like that, Relebogile, it's really been 10 years for me. I started, in community radio in 2013. So my first steps within the entertainment industry were in 2013.
Yeah.
It is now 2023. And I'm looking at all the things that have happened. Like you said, we just did the Summer Awards. There's so many shows, so many things that we can talk about right here on this show. But for me, just reflecting on the journey and having met people such as yourself at such a young age and such an early stage in my career, all of those things for me were affirmations. When I met you and we had that exchange, I also don't remember where it was, but I know it was beautiful and it had an impact on me, And every time I met one of my icons and people that I looked up to, I always went home and said to my mom, Ma, it's going to happen. Nami one day. Bayangazi.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
And I mean, I kind of feel like, that thing of it's going to happen, right? Do you also sometimes feel like all these things are happening, but you haven't had the feel of, oh, it's happening? Do you still feel like the it's going to happen is going to happen, or do you feel like it's now?
It's actually insane when you think about it or when you put it in that perspective, because I think as an artist or as an entertainer or as just somebody chasing after their career, when you hit the milestones, it's like, okay, this was on the vision board. It's happened now. What's next? The moment has come. You probably don't even remember the moment, because you were just so caught up in trying to make it perfect. We're always trying to perfect moments, whether it's on radio, whether it's on screen, whether it is, when you're hosting on stage, you want to get it right. And you get so engrossed in getting it right that you don't necessarily get the, the notion that, hey, I'm here. Let me feel it. Let me enjoy. So I think it comes with being an entertainer, being an artist, being a business person. Really and truly, you never really are aware of the impact that you make until you are on the other end of the moment.
Right.
And then you're like, yo, it really happened. So I think for me, I still definitely am at a point where I'm like, it's going to happen. It's going to happen.
Right.
Because the bigger dreams, have not been achieved yet. So I think, I don't know, maybe one day when I'm in a Hollywood blockbuster, I'm going to be like,
I've made it.
It's happened.
So I'm laughing about this because I have these conversations all the time with my team.
Yeah.
Where they'll be like, it's your year. I'm like, no, not yet. Soon it's going to be my time.
But let's
and
talk
I've been
about
saying
it.
that, right? But here's the thing. I was able to sort of pinpoint what happens. So let's say you have that moment of like booking that gig or like having that award, right? And that feeling lasts for like not longer than 48 hours till you're really like, okay, what's next? Exactly like what you're saying. So you never have that feeling. And I've said this, I have these conversations with my therapist about just being present in what is. So I struggle with that. And I find a lot of people in this space struggle with that thing. And I don't know if the fear is, if you feel like you've made it, then it means there is no next.
There is no next. I think you touch on such a great point where you're like, when you're in the moment, you're so scared of how people perceive it. When people congratulate you, you're like, thank you. But when somebody says, it's your time, when someone says it's your season, you're like, oh no, I wasn't ready. Because it gives you the feeling that, okay, are we rolling the credits? Is everybody clapping for me now? Is it over? Like, what do you mean? What's next after somebody says, it's your time? Relebogile, Nomalanga, it's your time. Shine, it's your time. I get so scared, or I used to get so scared when people would say things like that, because I'm like, okay, so then what does it mean for my 2025, for my 2026? And it's just the anxiety of existing in the entertainment industry. I don't know, maybe if I was in corporate, it would mean, imagine now I'm CEO level. I don't know.
Okay, I wonder, when you were younger, what did failure mean to you? Was it report card related? Was it, not having the taps shining after washing the dishes? What was that for you as a child?
I've been pondering on this since last night, since I got the brief, because we like to prepare. And, I had a conversation with my mother about it. And I said, Ma, how did I handle failure as a child? And what my mom said was, you never really cared to fail because you always just kind of succeeded. And it never got to your head. My mother is, she rules with an iron fist. I remember when I was named head girl in primary school and I came home, I was so excited. I was the first prefect in my family. Okay, well, not first prefect, but first prefect to make it to head girl status. And I came home and I said, Ma, sengu head girl manje. So what are you guys going to do to reward me? And my mom was like, we must reward you for being head girl. Aren't you going to show us how you are head girl here in the household? How are you going to lead? Show us that you deserve this position. So I've always just been striving for that excellence, always for that success, for the next thing to impress my mom, because my mother is not an easy one to impress. And it's gotten much easier as I've gotten older, because I now understand that she's just that type of person. She's always held herself to a certain standard. So of course her child is going to be head girl. Of course her child is going to do best.
Yes.
Of course she's going to win, all of the awards. I mean, head of the debating team, head of the volleyball team,
Yes.
always the captain, always coming home with trophies. That was my life, and it felt so normal. And I never really had a moment where I came home and I'm like, yo, Ma, I didn't do so well, until I got to matric. And when I got to matric, I had been so used to winning that when that pure maths paper 3 came and hit me, woo, babe. It was the first time I saw a 30% in my life.
Really?
Yeah, because, I did triple science, pure maths, biology, physics. And I was like, yeah, I'm that kid. I'm so used to being an overachiever. And I didn't understand that just wasn't a strength of mine.
Yes.
If we had a communications module or subject at school, I probably would have done so well because I did so well in orals.
Yeah.
And I didn't identify the gift at that point. I was just like, no, I need to do well in mathematics.
So what did that 30% represent to you?
My goodness, it was embarrassing because you feel like everybody knows. It's no longer a personal journey. Now it's the whole family's involved. My schoolmates are involved. My teammates are involved. My teachers are involved. What is happening? What is she not getting? And I think what that taught me at a very young age is that, I used to feel like it's not okay. It's not okay to fail. In those moments when I got that report card for the first time, I was like, you know what? It's fine. It doesn't define me. I'm still the top achiever. I just didn't do so well in this subject. And it means that I need to just apply myself more. I didn't realize that this just wasn't something that was cut out for me. And that's okay,
I actually thought you were going to say that you got to matric, and because you got to a point where you were kind of comfortable doing well, that you maybe didn't put in as much effort to certain things. I know with certain academic subjects, if I got it in the classroom, I didn't really need to study.
For sure.
So I probably didn't study as hard as I could have, right? And I mean that I think that sometimes applies to life as well, is that sometimes when you get high accolades in a space, you start to plateau in terms of the input, because now it's like, well, I am that good actually.
Yeah.
That's actually what I thought you were going to say.
Not really. For me, I saw it as a sign that I needed to kind of just apply myself more. And the more I tried was the more I failed. Until I got to a point where I was like, actually, this is just not for me. I did well in absolutely everything else except for mathematics.
Why did it only show up in matric? Because isn't the matric maths usually the build up from grade 10?
It is. I don't know. I think I did paper 3 as well, which wasn't a standard thing. So I did 8 subjects instead of 7, right? Because Gis Koko, you know, it was that paper 3 specifically that really got me down. And I was like, I don't even know who I am anymore if I'm not overachieving, you know. And I had to take a gap year the following year because it got me down so bad that I needed to figure myself out. And funny enough, within that gap year was when I found myself, or entertainment sort of found me. You know, it's a very interesting story of how I got into radio, but it happened in 2023. And that's when I was like, actually, this is who I am. I've always been this girl. I did the best in essay writing, creative writing, you know, speeches and things like that, that involved engaging with other human beings, that involved engaging my creative juices. That's where I thrived.
Please tell me what that conversation sounded like when you're like, Ma, I'm taking a gap year.
So,
As a Zulu girl, what is that conversation? Because obviously times now have changed, but back in the day in certain households, that is just unheard of. What do you mean? Because gap year sounds like you're going to sit and do nothing, right?
Yeah, for sure.
What does that mean, and what did that conversation go like?
So, first things first, I wanted to really get this maths paper 3 right. I need you to understand, it was such a thorn in my side. So I said, actually, I'm going to take a year off and I'm going to supplement. I'm going to redo it.
Yeah.
Number 1. So my mom was like, okay, that's cool. But what else are you going to do? I was like, okay, I'll go to like an FET college and like do like engineering. I did electrical engineering. Cool, I did that. And in the midst of all of that, within my travels to and from school and, you know, these tutor classes, I was in a taxi and I was listening to the radio. And I was like, oh, I can't believe this is what people talk about on the radio. And I was very opinionated as a child.
Yes.
And the person sitting next to me was like, why? And I gave him my 2 cents. And he was like, well, that's interesting. I'm actually doing market research right now. I'm the station manager at this particular radio station. And I think you have a really good viewpoint. Would you want to come and audition for a show? And I was like, great. They put me on a breakfast show, and then that was my show.
Wow.
Yeah. So I said to Mom, okay, I'm doing this tertiary, this FET course. I'm doing this maths paper 3 supplementary tutor lessons. I'm going to do radio as well because I also need money, you know, like let me just, you know, be my own little independent thing, you know. And she was like, okay, cool, as long as it doesn't disturb you. And that's when the bug really bit me because it felt like such a big responsibility. It's a station called Ugu Youth Radio. I love them to bits. It was such a fun ride. And it just became my gateway to so much more.
And I'm thinking just back to, I mean, when moments like that happen, which are like divine intervention. Right?
Yeah.
At what point did you say, oh, this is what I'm supposed to be doing? Because it doesn't always happen in the by chance meeting and getting the gig.
Yeah.
When was that moment where you're like, okay, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. That engineering thing can be parked. I'm going to focus my energy here.
I think when I started seeing the monetary value, and my mom could see that as well, because she's all about the money. I said, Ma, you know, look, this is what's going down right now. And she was like, you know what? You're not lying. So I said, what I actually want to do is public relations because within the job I was doing on the radio, I got introduced to the world of PR and communication, and it was something that I had never heard of before in my life. You must remember, I come from a very, very small village in a very small town. Ekugcineni kweKwaZulu-Natal, at the end, just before it becomes the Eastern Cape.
Yes.
So a lot of things we're not really, exposed to. So I started participating in a lot of things that engaged the youth, and I stumbled upon this course and this career path called PR and communications. And I was like, that's what I'm going to do. It falls exactly in line with what I'm already doing on the radio. I want to learn more about this world. And my mom was like, okay, so what do you want to do? I was like, I'm dropping the maths, I'm dropping the engineering, I'm going to go to Durban to study public relations. And she was like, are you sure about that? I was like, yes. She said, go.
And then that just became the direction that you were headed in.
Yeah.
Who was at home when you were growing up? I mean, you speak a lot about mom. Who else was in the picture? Just the key figures when you were growing up.
Key figures growing up, my mother and my father, my older brother, Nick, my younger brother, Marvin, and my late younger sister, Maya. Yeah.
Maya, I mean, may her soul rest in peace, passed on as a child, which is just absolutely devastating. And you lost your sister when you were 8 years old.
Yeah.
Can you tell us about some of the memories you have of her? Because 8 is old enough to have the memories and still grasp them, but young enough to still lose some of them.
100%. So my relationship with her was mind-boggling because she was 4, I was 8, but she was my protector. She had so much life and so much energy. In some ways, I feel like if she had, lived longer, she probably would be doing the exact same thing I'm doing, but maybe even better.
Yes.
She was always the explorer. She would crush up like crayons and take mom's brushes and use them as blush.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean? Like, she was so into just looking beautiful. She was absolutely gorgeous. We had a really beautiful, beautiful relationship. I was always the softie and she was larger than life. Don't mess with my sister.
Yes.
I will come for you. And she's tiny. It was a stunning relationship. I was in love with her. And when we lost her, it was just soul crushing. And I think the way that we also lost her was just so unfathomable. And I've kind of carried her, throughout my career and throughout my life. And I sort of see her, I feel her absence a lot. I felt it a lot in my growing up. And now that I'm much older and I understand emotions and I understand grief, I realize that I have been grieving since 2002. Yeah.
So what had actually happened on that fateful day when the family lost her?
So we were on our way to church and we were late as always. Love my mother, but that is a tardy lady.
Yeah.
But when she shows up, she shows out.
Yes.
So it was just one of those rushed Sunday mornings. Nick and Marvin went ahead of us. We were right behind them. And we got into an argument again. Very big personality, super stubborn little girl. She says to me, I'm not going to cross the road right now. I'm going to wait for mom. And I'm like, mom is literally right behind us. Let's go. We're late, and ubungani, In my mind, I'm like, we really need to get to church, And she was like, okay, then you go. I'll wait. I was like, like, come on my back. Like, let's go. She was like, no, I'm waiting for mom. And I was just like, well, okay. And I went ahead and crossed the street. Well, the road. It's literally the N2 and the N3. And she followed me. Yeah. And when I turned around, it was just so graphic. It was, I think even now I remember it so clearly. I have never been able to shake that, that memory and that moment off. It was just a silly little tiff between two sisters. She didn't want to follow me. And when I left her, she followed me. And it was just too late.
So she was then hit by a car.
A taxi, yeah.
And when that moment happened, where was mom? Was mom still in the house?
No, mom was literally right behind us. She saw all of it happen. Yeah.
And for you, I mean, being 8 years old is a different level of where you are developmentally. What was your understanding of that moment? Because, you know, so many people, when they speak about any major losses, some of them will say, even before I got to the house, I just knew that. Or were you still in that moment holding on to the, nope, she's still going to be fine?
You know, I did not really understand the severity of what had happened. I was really confused because when I turned around, I saw a body fly and I was like, why does that body look like my sister? She's dressed like my sister. And I looked at where she was and she wasn't there anymore. And then when it clicked, it was just this scream from the depths of my soul where I was just like, oh no, what have I done? You know? And when we speak about failure, you know, something like that is, I don't even think I've fully understood it. I don't think I've fully grasped, you know, the moment for what it was and what it meant. It comes in waves sometimes where I'm just like, whoo, overwhelmed. And then sometimes I'm like, okay, it happened. It wasn't my fault. And I think for a lot of what happened thereafter, I really thank my mother because she shielded me from it a lot. She obviously couldn't shield me from my own thoughts, right? And I felt like as a big sister, I failed and I let my little sister down. I let my whole family down, you know? And I was so caught up in how I was dealing with it that I didn't realize how it affected everybody else. And it shifted the dynamic in our family, you know, holistically. And I think it was 2016 where I had a moment of catharsis where I was in a role on Rhythm City and the woman I was playing had just lost her newborn. And that was the first time I really just let all of those emotions really just wash over me. And it was so therapeutic. It was so therapeutic, but so scary because I then got stuck in that story for some time, for about 2 years. I couldn't shake it off. I couldn't shake those emotions. I had to just, you know, continue because as life progresses, we have to show up, you know. But the truth of the matter is, if it wasn't for that role, I don't think I would have fully understood what happened on the 9th of June, 2022.
In terms of
2002, rather, sorry.
Yes. In terms of self-forgiveness, you know, because you speak like you carried blame and guilt over what happened, like there's something you could have done differently. Do you think you're yet at a point where you're like, I've forgiven myself for whatever it is I'm feeling in regards to that loss in that moment?
You know, the way my mother made me understand it was that when it's time for something to happen, it will happen no matter what. And sometimes you could feel like it's because of you and it's your fault. But it really is just how it was supposed to be. So I don't necessarily think I had a moment with myself where I was like, oh, I forgive myself. Or, you know, I just continue to wonder what would have happened if things just played out differently. Yeah. I don't think I'm not sure. I really am not sure. I don't know if I'll get to that point where I'm like, I forgive myself, you know? My mom said it wasn't my fault. And I believed her, you know? And I held on to that. I was like, okay, it's not your fault. It's not your fault. Yes, you could have done something better, but it wasn't your fault, you know? I had to make peace with the fact that it is what it is.
Nomalanga, you know, earlier on when we were just speaking about forgiving self, right? And I was saying that it's whenever tragedy occurs, we feel like we need to blame somebody. Hence, even the concept of forgiveness comes there. And you were saying you're not really sure, but you have carried with you, and I think it's so critical that your mom shared this with you, that it isn't your fault. Did you believe it always?
I believed it when she told me, until I got older and I had to decode a lot of things that were happening in my life and like behavioral patterns and like things that were just repeating themselves. I'm like, why am I this type of person in a relationship, at work, in a friendship? Why do I behave this way? And it came to me that, well, in therapy, because my mom took us all to therapy afterwards, and bless her for that, you know, my mom's a teacher, and she taught me that being a teacher, you wear so many hats. You're a nurse, you're a psychologist, you're
A social worker.
You're a social worker. You're so many things. You're a parent, you know, to so many children. And what she wanted us to all take with us is no shame when it comes to, you know, acknowledging that I need help and crying out for help. So she took us all to therapy. And in therapy, that's where I realized, Uguti, okay, I'm this type of person because of that pain, because I'm so afraid of being abandoned, or I'm so afraid of failing somebody else. I'm so afraid of not having backup, like a backup person that is my backbone. Because my sister, though younger than me, she really was my backbone. Like I said, she was the feisty Pisces and I was the soft Cancer, you know. So I definitely believed it. And I now believe it again. For some time, I felt like, no, maybe my mom was just saying that because she wanted to protect me from conversations that, you know, were being held within the family and just in the community. Because it's always like, why gay pussy swag? You know what I mean? And yeah, I think now I grapple, like off air just now, I was thinking to myself when you said, have I come to a point where I've forgiven myself? I'm like, I don't know if I'm the one I need to forgive or if God's the one I need to forgive, or if it's, you know, us running
driver.
the driver, you know, because there was also a whole case with him as well, because the car was then found to not even be roadworthy. You know, did he brake in time, etc. So many different things where I'm like, actually, I think what I need to forgive is the situation that had happened and just let go, you know, because when you hold on to pain for so long, it starts to define you, you know, and I realized and recognized after some time that I was letting that story define me, and patterns began to repeat themselves. You know, in friendships mostly. That's where I realized.
What did you find yourself doing? Because you've touched on the part of the abandonment and the letting somebody down.
Yeah.
But was it behavior of like self-sabotage or putting walls up and not allowing people to get too close? What did you see was the pattern?
So the pattern was really overextending myself, over loving, and I'm not even, it sounds weird when someone says that, like I overextend myself.
I think we know now what that means is if somebody's like, will you attend my baby shower?
Yeah.
And you're like, let me host, let me do the flowers.
100%.
That's what overextend. No one asked you. And then on the day, you're like, I'm so stressed. I'm doing this. And then it's like, you know.
Spot on.
Somebody's
so
just
eager
like,
to please.
Yes.
So eager to please. And the moment I feel like I've let somebody down or disappointed someone, I feel like a ton of bricks literally just descended upon me, you know, and I started to realize that this is actually, you know, destructive behavior, because you are not creating any boundaries around yourself, you know, you know, everything and anything goes. And I started to recognize that it hurts me more than it pleases the next person, you know. I found myself...
Did it also build like a resentment? If, for example, you overextend, right? And then you feel like how this person's not showing up for me.
Oh, 100%.
And I show up for them.
100%. And, you know, the Bible teaches us that, you know, love keeps no record of wrong. Oh, mine kept record of everything. Let me tell you something. It got to a point where I would literally put in table format that I did this for you, I did that for you, and you did nothing. And it's like, you know, this person can only meet me as far as they can meet me, you know, and I would have all of these expectations because I'm like, okay, I've done everything perfectly. There's absolutely no reason for this person to forget my birthday. No reason for this person not to get me a present. I'm only inviting you to my birthday. All you have to do is show up with a present. Dinner, drinks, everything is on me. It's a 3-day vacation to Cape Town. What do you mean? I've paid for everything. You mean you couldn't get me a present? You know, and things like that I would feel like so strongly about. And I started to ask myself, do I do these things for my friends and people that I love because I want them to love me like my sister loved me? I started to look for her in people, you know, and once I found that, okay, you don't measure up, nobody started to measure up. And I realized, Uguti, I'm going to live my life as an island if I continue this way. You cannot buy somebody's loyalty. You cannot buy somebody's friendship or love. But I realized, Uguti, in friendships, like hard. You know, I will go above and beyond. Literally hosting somebody's birthday at my house for no reason.
And no one asked you.
Nobody asked me to.
Now, here's the part I'm curious about is how did that manifest in relationships in the sense of if you are in a people-pleasing space of no boundaries, I feel you would naturally attract leeches and people with narcissistic traits.
For sure.
So how did that show up in your intimate partner relationships?
I recognized that I was so attached to the idea of perfection on my part that I really could not let the other person be just themselves. You know, I felt that if I did everything right, you know, just like a register, just like when you've studied for a test, really you should get a certain result and outcome. And it stopped me from just allowing somebody to fully be themselves without any pressure. I realized, Uguti, I really am a strict lover. Very, 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 very strict. And I felt validated and justified in that because of how I behave in the relationship. And yeah, needless to say.
So what I find interesting, I mean, I'm so happy we're now in an era where you don't even have to be going to a therapist to be familiar with the lingos and being able to connect the dots of our behavior, what we attract, and all of those things. So when you look at those intimate partner relationships, do you feel that you were judging in inverted commas?
For sure. Oh, I am extremely judgmental.
But judging because you're hard on yourself.
100%. 100%. Because I'm so hard on myself, I cannot show the next person my weakness. Therefore, I have to overcompensate for the weakness that I've identified in myself, lest they pick it up, which they obviously always do. Because a relationship, really, what I've found is that it really is just a mirror. You know, and sometimes we're so scared of being confronted with ourselves or by ourselves because what you do, the other person literally will mimic. Or the void that you're trying to fill, ngabo, they will make it apparent that, yo, there's a void and this is much bigger than me. And I'm not the person to fill that. And it's like, but what do you mean? You're the person that I love, you know, and it becomes that back and forth until you realize that absolutely nothing exists outside of yourself. Everything that happens, how you perceive things in the world, all of it has to do with you. Full stop. You know?
Yeah.
And once you come to terms with that, which I'm still coming to terms with, I think life becomes easier. I've definitely eased myself from a lot of things now. Like life is a lot more easier for me because I understand that it really is just a big act of letting go. And once you just start to release just a little bit, you feel less pain.
So we are going to take a break, but when we come back, I actually want to know the how you are doing it, because the knowing how to connect the dots to say, okay, I have, whether it's abandonment issues, disappointing people issues, people pleasing issues, knowing where the source is, and then actually doing the work, and then actually having real life situations where you apply the work, not just having the awareness. I'm so curious as to how you do it. Earlier on, we were having a conversation just around the self-awareness part of where you were at and how you were connecting it to, you know, the tragic event earlier on in your life. How are you taking those things now that you're aware of and applying them? Because, you know, it's a lifelong journey, this healing thing, right? When you recognize, oh my gosh, I'm overly critical, I'm overly judgmental, or things that I see in myself. Now to do it in real life is something else.
Yeah.
You know, especially if you tend to micromanage yourself.
Yeah. I think vulnerability is such a big part of healing. When you're able to be vulnerable with yourself and the people closest to you around you and be like, you know, this is what I'm dealing with. And just letting go of the perfectionism, because for me, that's always been a thing. Like there's a standard, we have to maintain the standard, whether it's at work, you know, making sure that stakeholders are happy, whether it's in the family, making sure that I'm doing all of my duties as a daughter, as a sister, as an aunt, whether it's in relationships as a girlfriend, in friendships as a best friend. You know, I had to really be open and vulnerable with the people in my life, because I had lived maybe like a good 23 years of my life just pretending like that event didn't happen. And I would be alone with my thoughts at night. And nobody knew that, it affected me in the way that it affected me, until I had to be open with somebody one day and say, this is actually what happened. And I saw the dynamic shift, because the way that they would respond to me when I have those moments where I'm being a bit hectic and I'm micromanaging them and I'm saying, no, but you didn't do this and this is not in accordance. I saw the energy that they gave me change, and it was such a soft landing.
Empathy.
Yeah, empathy. When people understand where you come from, when people know just a bit of your story, they relate to you, because everybody can, relate to grief. Everybody can relate to loss. Some things maybe not so much as others, but when I realized, okay, the more vulnerable I am is the easier the healing process becomes. That's when I had to really just let go of this idea of perfectionism and being so perfect and so eager to please, and say, listen, I actually am carrying a burden and it hurts. How can you help me? And again, my mom's advice to go to therapy really helped, because I can articulate almost anything until it comes to my emotions and my feelings. And when they ask you, why do you feel like that? And I'm like, I don't know, I just do, Standing still, sitting still, and really just listening to your thoughts. And okay, this is the point where it hurts the most. How am I going to stop it from hurting this much and having it affect me as much as it did 20 years ago? Just breathe, breathe. Communicate, because sometimes as women especially, we expect everybody to understand what's going on in our minds. Like, you should just know. No, communicate, use your words, use your voice, use your thoughts, express. And when I started to express more, Relebogile, wow.
What does healing look like? Because as you're speaking, I mean, obviously we are speaking specifically about your journey, but there were parents involved and other siblings. And I'm thinking about the many families who go through loss, and people heal in silos, as you were speaking about, you kept certain things to yourself. What does healing look like as a family when the last born in the household is gone? Did you ever have moments where you sat together and just spoke as a group about your feelings? And I know we don't do this often enough in homes. It's only like in the week prior to the funeral where we'll openly be teary with one another, but to actively be like, all right, we're going to sit together and yeah.
So I did that with my mother a couple of years ago, where I asked her, I was like, how did this event affect you? And she said, you're the first person to ask me that.
No,
I
for
said,
real?
What? She's like, yeah. All these years I've been, fighting with doctors and the hospital bill and this, that, and all of these, stakeholders in this event that happened. Nobody ever asked me how I dealt with it. She's like, she grieved for 5 years. For 5 full years, she was not herself. She completely shed herself of herself. And now, being a mother myself, I can't even imagine how that must have felt for her, and having to be strong for everyone. There were moments where I needed her so badly. I just needed a hug, and she wouldn't want to touch me, or any of us for that matter. And when I would ask her, why? What is wrong? She would just shut down. And that was how she grieved. I asked my father, and he asked me, he was like, what actually happened that day? Because I never asked you.
Really?
Yeah. And we had so many hospital visits. And when I told him, he was like,
when you say hospital visits, what was happening with the hospital visits?
she was in ICU.
Okay, so
Yeah.
she didn't die at the scene.
No,
she was in the hospital.
She was in the hospital for about a month.
Oh.
Yeah. So when all of that was happening, we would go with sometimes, because there's nobody to look after us, etc. And I remember the one time, we were just leaving the hospital, and my dad was like, why did you leave her? But he wasn't really asking me. He was saying it to himself, but I heard him. And that was the first time I was like, was this actually like my fault? And then I had the conversation with my mom afterwards. She was like, I'm not mad at you. Nobody's mad at you. It's not your fault. And when I had that conversation with my dad and he asked me what actually happened, I think he was trying to reconcile that question, that moment that I remember so vividly with my encounter, and just come to a point where, because Maya really was his favorite, I have to say. They were thick as thieves. And he said, it's okay, my child. You're my child as much as she's my child. I love all of you equally. We miss her sorely, but we're at peace with the fact that God wanted it to happen this way.
So at the end of her journey, was it, a discussion where the family had to be part of a decision, or the doctors did everything that they could and then she didn't make it?
They did everything that they could, and she didn't make it. It was a conversation that needed to be held though, or had, because she was plugged to the life support machine, etc. So they had to come a decision where it's like, we don't have the funds to continue this for much longer. So yeah.
Now that you are a mother, to a little baby girl who is almost 2 quite soon.
She's just like my sister,
right?
by the way.
I was going to say.
Oh my goodness.
What is that like, having a daughter and also now having a conversation like you did with your mother, now being a parent?
It's given me so much perspective on that event specifically, but also just my relationship with my mom and how my mom relates to me. I think oftentimes as young moms, we hate to admit that we actually become our mothers ourselves. I see so many of my mother's traits in me in the way that I am towards my daughter, but not even in a strict disciplinarian type of way, but in just just wanting to care for and make sure that she's okay at all times. Letting go is such a difficult thing. I understand the dynamic between myself and my mom a lot more. It's brought us much closer. But also, like I said, there's so many similarities between my daughter and my late sister. It's so uncanny. It's freaky, actually. Yes. She has such a big personality. She lights up the room. She has so much love. I'm afraid because the world that we live in is just not as pure as it used to be. So the love that she has and just the innocence in her, sometimes I'm just like, yo, Danam, how am I going to protect you from
and preserve all of that?
Yeah.
Final thoughts in one sentence. What would you share with everybody that you've learned about failure?
That it is a necessary vehicle to growth. And if you use it wisely, can be such an important tool that sharpens you for the world and just life in general. Understanding how to take blows when they knock you down and how to get back up. Really, it's in how you get back up and that willingness to fight. So many of us sometimes feel like giving up, but that decision to say, "I namhlanje."
Not today. Not today.
702.
The upside of failure.
Sometimes failure is the foundation of greatest success stories.